Imagine a sky heavy with clouds, where thunder rumbles not as weather, but as a whisper from the heavens, carrying the weight of something greater than mere storms. For the ancient Greeks, thunder was never just sound. It was the living voice of Zeus, the ruler of Olympus, the king of gods, the one who held lightning in his hand. Yet Zeus was not only a distant figure high above the clouds, he was a god who walked among mortals, often in disguise, seeking to test their hearts and reveal their truths. Were these trials, punishments, or were they gifts of guidance? Each test acted like a mirror, showing mortals who they truly were, kind or cruel, humble or proud, wise or reckless. Tonight we step into these stories where ordinary people, farmers, kings, poets, and lovers suddenly found themselves under the watchful gaze of Zeus. Some rose to meet the test with honor, others stumbled under the weight of pride, but all left behind lessons powerful enough to be told for generations. So let the thunder roll in the distance and listen closely. These are the tests of Zeus and the trials that shape the heart of legend. There was once a small village, far from great cities, where mountains touched the clouds and fields of grain stretched beneath the sky. In this quiet place, people lived simple lives, tending their land, their animals, and their families, unaware that the gods sometimes walked among them. One evening, two weary travelers arrived, robes dusty, sandals worn thin, carrying no wealth, only the tired steps of strangers seeking rest. They knocked on many doors, but each one was closed. Some villagers looked with suspicion, others mocked, and none offered bread, water, or kindness. At the edge of the village stood a tiny cottage, its roof patched with reeds, its walls weathered, and inside lived an elderly couple, Baucis and Philemon. They had little more than each other, yet their hearts overflowed with warmth. When the travelers arrived, Baucis hurried to invite them inside. She smiled as she welcomed them to rest by the fire, while Philemon brought a stool and Baucis fetched a bowl of water to wash their hands. Their table was small and worn, but they filled it with all they had: olives, fruit, cheese, and bread, still fresh from the day's baking. Philemon poured wine from a jug that should have emptied quickly, but each time he filled a cup, it remained full, never running dry. Baucis and Philemon exchanged knowing glances, for their hearts told them these were no ordinary travelers sitting at their humble table. The strangers revealed themselves at last: Zeus, the king of the gods, and Hermes, the swift messenger, clothed in the brilliance of the heavens. Zeus declared that the villagers who had turned them away would face the cost of their cruelty, but the couple's kindness would be honored. He spoke gently. "You gave freely, though you had little. Ask of me any gift, and it shall be yours." His voice carried both power and grace. Baucis and Philemon looked at one another with love aged by many years. They asked not for wealth or power, but for a simple wish. "We ask to serve you as your priests, and when our time comes, to leave life together, so neither is left to face the world alone." Zeus smiled, for such a wish was rare. With a wave of his hand, the cottage transformed, walls growing tall, roof shining with gold. The poor hut became a grand temple, carved with vines and stars, a place of worship and welcome for any traveler who sought refuge. There they lived long years, serving the gods, offering bread and kindness to every guest, remembering the night Zeus entered their door. When their final day arrived, they stood hand in hand, and their bodies changed, arms turning into branches, fingers into leaves. Together they became two trees, rooted side by side, crowns of green touching, whispering in the wind, forever bound in love and memory. Their story spread across Greece, reminding all that hospitality was sacred, for a god might hide in any stranger who knocked at one's door. The test of Baucis and Philemon became a timeless lesson. Generosity is not measured by wealth, but by the heart's willingness to give. High in the mountains of Arcadia, forests stretched like waves of green, and there lived a king named Lycaon, proud and powerful in his golden halls. Though his people respected him, Lycaon doubted the gods. He believed their stories were myths, their power exaggerated, their presence nothing more than fancy tales. If Zeus is truly king of the gods, Lycaon declared before his court, let him prove it. His voice carried not reverence, but arrogance, born of pride. The whispers of men do not escape Olympus. Zeus, hearing Lycaon's scorn, descended to Arcadia in disguise, robes plain, eyes calm, feet dusty from travel. He arrived at the king's hall during a feast. Tables overflowed with roasted meats, fruits, and wine. Lycaon welcomed him with a smile that hid suspicion. The stranger's presence stirred unease. Some courtiers whispered, could this be Zeus himself? But Lycaon laughed. God or not, he thought, I will test him tonight. The king watched with cunning eyes. If this man were divine, no disguise could hide it. If not, Lycaon would expose him as a fraud before all. When the feast ended, Lycaon turned to the guest. If you are Zeus, prove it. Show me a sign, something no mortal could ever do. Silence filled the hall. The courtiers glanced nervously, but the traveler spoke softly. It is not the duty of gods to prove themselves, but mortals to live with reverence. Lycaon's pride flared. Then you are no god, he said boldly. In that moment, the trial was complete. Not of Zeus, but of Lycaon's own heart. The stranger rose. His robe dissolved into storm and fire. His eyes blazed like lightning. His voice thundered through the hall. The courtiers fell to their knees. Lycaon froze. He had demanded proof, and now it stood before him. The truth burned brighter than his pride, leaving him powerless to deny. Zeus's voice shook the hall. Lycaon, your arrogance has judged you. You tested the divine, but it is you who has been tested and found wanting. The pride of a king can lead his people astray. Reverence is not weakness, but strength. Arrogance blinds even the most powerful to truth. With thunder and light, Zeus departed. The feast lay silent, untouched. The courtiers whispered prayers, their faith rekindled by the god's presence. Lycaon's tale spread through Greece, not as triumph, but as warning. To test the gods with pride is to test one's own soul and risk its undoing. The people of Arcadia never forgot. Their king was humbled, their faith renewed, and Zeus's name carried a weight no man dared question again. Thus the story of Lycaon's pride became one of Zeus's tests, a reminder that humility is strength and pride, even in kings, leads only to ruin. There is a story whispered through generations about a stranger who came knocking one quiet evening in a village far from temples and kings. Life in that place was measured by harvests and hearth fires, where families ended their days around simple meals, not glory or power. One evening, beneath a sky of fading light and rising stars, a weary figure appeared at the edge of the village road. His cloak was worn, his sandals dusty, his beard tangled from travel, and he leaned heavily on a wooden staff. He walked slowly, pausing at each home, waiting quietly, but most doors remained shut as villagers settled behind warm walls. At the first house, he knocked, its walls bright and its windows glowing with laughter and plenty. Inside, a wealthy family feasted, their table heavy with bread, olives, and roasted meat sizzling over coals. The man of the house heard the sound but waved it away. Not tonight, he muttered, ignoring the voice beyond his door. His children laughed, his wife stayed silent, and the music of their meal soon drowned the knocking altogether. The stranger moved on. staff tapping the dirt, and came to a smaller home with stew steaming through the shutters. He knocked gently once more, but a voice inside snapped quickly. "We have no room. Beg elsewhere." The footsteps retreated, leaving silence. The door never opened, and the traveler walked on under the night sky. At the edge of the village, hidden in shadows, he found a crooked cottage with a sagging roof and smoke drifting thinly. Here he knocked again, and the door creaked open to reveal a woman with kind eyes and patched dress. Behind her, an old man rose slowly from his bench by the fire, his face lined but warm with welcome. "Come in," the woman said. "You must be tired. Sit by our fire, share what little we have." Inside, the cottage was bare, shelves nearly empty, yet the hearth glowed with a gentle, steady warmth. They set before him bread, olives, and a little wine, offering freely though they had little to spare. They spoke kindly, listening to his story, asking nothing of their own, content to serve the weary guest. As the fire crackled, the stranger's voice grew deeper, carrying a weight far greater than simple thanks. "You did not know who knocked at your door," he said, "yet you opened it with kindness and honor." The couple's hands trembled, sensing something divine in his words, though they dared not interrupt. Suddenly, his cloak shimmered, his staff gleamed, and the air inside the cottage filled with radiant power. The couple bowed their heads, for they knew the truth. Zeus himself had stood before them in disguise. With a gesture, the sagging roof straightened, the wood renewed, and the shelves filled with grain and fruit. The fire blazed higher, eternal, as Zeus declared, "You gave freely with kindness, and so you shall never want." From then, the cottage never fell to storm or hunger, standing as a beacon while whispers spread through the village. Some felt shame for doors they had left closed, knowing Zeus had walked among them and found them lacking. For the test of Zeus was simple and eternal. Would you welcome the stranger or turn him away? And in one humble cottage at the edge of the village, the answer was yes, and it became a story never forgotten. Long ago, in a city by the sea, there lived a king whose pride was taller than his palace walls and heavier than his glittering crown. He believed every harvest, every calm sea, and every victory came from his wisdom, never from the gods above. When the skies darkened and thunder rumbled, he stood on his balcony and laughed at the storm. "What storm dares rise against me," he declared. "I, who rule men and land, will not bow to thunder." But the storm was no ordinary storm, it was Zeus, displeased with the king's arrogance, who stirred the clouds. The winds howled, tearing banners and shaking trees, while waves crashed high into the harbor, flooding the streets. The people panicked, rushing to temples, begging Zeus for mercy, their voices trembling in prayer. Yet the king silenced his priests. "There will be no prayers," he commanded. "The storm will break before my will." Night fell and lightning split the sky. The palace shook, but still the king stood, clutching his crown. Then a figure entered the throne room, cloaked, dripping with rain, eyes calm and bright. "You defy the storm?" the stranger asked, his quiet voice stronger than the thunder outside. "I am the storm," the king answered proudly. "No god commands me." The stranger studied him, then spoke. "You mistake pride for power. A true king listens even to thunder." Lightning flashed, and the stranger's form shifted, his robe glowing, his eyes burning with divine fire. The air bowed to him. The king's knees trembled, for he knew Zeus stood before him. But Zeus did not strike. He raised his hand, and the wind stilled inside the chamber. "You are tested," Zeus declared, "not by armies but by humility. Will you kneel to truth?" The king's pride battled his fear. His crown grew heavy. His voice caught in his throat. He finally bent his knee, lowered his head, and whispered, "I am nothing without the gods." At once, the thunder faded. The waves calmed, and the storm's roar sank back into silence. Zeus looked upon him with a nod, not anger. You have learned. Your people will be spared. When the god vanished, only his words lingered, echoing in the quiet chamber. The king rose, pride broken but wisdom awakened, his crown now lighter upon his head. From that day he ruled not as a master above his people, but as a servant of balance. And in the city, by the sea, the tale lived on. Power without humility invites thunder. Not every test of Zeus came with storms. Some came as softly as whispers, hidden in words, in promises, in the fragile weight of truth. There was once a poet, a man whose voice could charm a crowd. His verses softened even the hardest hearts, carried across marketplaces and temples. His words traveled farther than his feet ever could. The poet lived for beauty, for the power of language to stir the soul. Yet with that power came vanity, the belief that words belonged only to him. One evening, during a great festival, the poet faced the crowd. Lanterns glowed, music filled the air, and all eyes turned to him as he raised his lyre. He smiled, certain his verses would live long after the night. But before he began, a stranger stepped forward from the crowd. Clothed in simple robes, hair streaked with silver, the man carried no instrument. His gaze was steady, his voice calm, but his question cut sharp. Will you sing in your own name, or in honor of the gods who gave you breath? The poet laughed, his pride swelling like a drum. I need no gods, he declared. My words are mine alone. I will sing as I please. The crowd stirred uneasily, their whispers tangled in the night air. The stranger fell silent, yet the air grew heavy, pressing on every chest. From far off, thunder rumbled softly, though the skies above were clear. The poet struck his lyre, and his song began to rise. His voice lifted, weaving tales of heroes, of grief, of eternal love. But his words faltered. His tongue felt heavy, like stone in his mouth. The rhyme stumbled, broken, the melody twisting awkwardly in his throat. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, their awe dissolving into doubt. Some whispered that he had lost his gift. Others turned away, pity shadowing their faces. The poet pressed on, panic flooding his chest like fire. But the harder he tried, the more his words twisted and failed. Each sound became hollow, stripped of beauty, robbed of meaning. Silence spread across the crowd like a tide. The stranger stepped forward again, his voice low but steady. Now you see, your gift is not yours alone. Without the gods, you are empty. The poet dropped his lyre, his pride shattering like glass. Tears burned his eyes as he fell to his knees, broken. Forgive me, he whispered. I see now, my gift is not mine to boast of. I swear by Zeus that every song I sing will honor the gods. The air shifted. The heavy silence melted into calm. A breeze swept the square, soft as a sigh of relief. The stars brightened, gleaming like sparks across the heavens. One note from the lyre rang clear, pure, shimmering in the night. The stranger's form shimmered too, robes glowing like sunrise on storm clouds. His eyes burned with both fire and kindness. It was Zeus himself, cloaked in the shape of a man. You have learned, Zeus thundered, his voice deep and rolling. Talent is not for pride. It is a bridge, a gift, an offering. The poet bowed low, his heart renewed with humility. He lifted his lyre again, and the music was sweeter than ever. Every note carried gratitude, every word an offering. The crowd listened in silence, tears shining in their eyes. The poet no longer sang for glory, but for truth. And in truth, his verses became eternal, woven into memory. Every village and city carried his songs like sacred flame. But they remembered not only his words, but the lesson within. Pride without gratitude leads only to silence. For even the poet, with all his brilliance, could not escape the tests of Zeus. In the hills of Thessaly lived a farmer named Dorian, a man of steady hands and simple hopes, whose fields stretched wide and golden. Each seed was a prayer, each harvest a blessing, each sunrise a gift, yet with every gift came toil, and with toil came doubt. Dorian was not a man of temples or offerings. He trusted his labor and believed sweat alone could sustain his family. Why pray to gods when it is my plow that breaks the soil, my hands that guide the seed? He would tell his neighbors. One year, rain fell in torrents, drowning the shoots before they could rise, turning his fields into a swamp of rot. Storms gathered day after day, lightning split the sky, and the wind tore at his barley until nothing remained. Dorian stood in the flooded field, fists clenched, shouting at the heavens, his voice raw with anger and despair. Enough! What good are your storms, Zeus? Do you take pleasure in sinking a man's labor into mud? Thunder answered, rolling deep across the hills, and though his cries vanished into wind, the god listened. That night, lightning split the shadows, and Zeus stepped into his cottage, filling the small space with fire and storm. Farmer, the god thundered, you curse the storms, yet you do not see their gift. Dorian trembled, but his voice rose against the storm. Gift? My crops drown, my family suffers. Where is the gift in ruin? You believe your strength alone sustains you, Zeus said, eyes burning. You forget the skies, the winds, the earth itself. You are tested, farmer, to learn what pride cannot teach, Zeus declared before vanishing in a flash of lightning. The storm roared, tearing the roof away, leaving Dorian broken and lost beneath the endless, angry sky. Days passed with cruelty, rains drowning all hope, barns growing empty, neighbors whispering of his defiance. He worked until his hands bled, yet nothing grew, his harvest lost to the relentless punishment of the storm. At last, weary and broken, he wandered into the forest, collapsing beneath an old oak as rain dripped from its leaves. For the first time, he bowed his head and whispered, Zeus, I cannot survive alone. The earth and sky are not mine. If you grant me another chance, I will not forget, he prayed, his words raw with humility and hope. The storm broke, clouds parted, stars glimmered, and the air carried the soft scent of renewal and life. When he returned to his fields, the waters had receded, and fresh shoots rose strong from the darkened soil. The neighbors watched in wonder, whispering, as his fields grew rich again, green with promise and touched by grace. They asked how he had turned disaster into fortune, and Dorian only smiled, his gaze lifted toward the sky. The plow was strong, but not stronger than the heavens, he said. We labor, but the gods sustain. From then on, he set aside the first sheaf of every harvest as an offering to Zeus in gratitude. He no longer saw storms as punishment, but as reminders of balance, humility, and the bond between man and God. Zeus, watching from the heights of Olympus, was satisfied, for the farmer had been tested and had learned reverence. In a kingdom by the Aegean Sea lived King Acastus, admired for wisdom, feared for temper, and known for his devotion to honor. One spring, an envoy arrived from afar, begging for ships of grain to save his starving city, offering gold and alliance. The court urged Acastus to give freely, for his stores were full, the harvest rich, and generosity would strengthen bonds. The king nodded, yet pride whispered within, if I give, they will see me not as equal, but as master. He proclaimed before the court, yes, the ships will sail, my promise will hold. The envoy bowed, relief on his face. That night, in the palace gardens, a stranger appeared, his eyes glinting with stormlight. questioning the king's intent. "Who are you to question me?" Acastus demanded, his voice sharp, though unease stirred beneath his pride. The stranger shimmered, revealing Zeus himself, crowned with fire, voice rolling like thunder through the night. "You will be tested," Zeus declared. "A promise is the weight of your soul, the true measure of your honor." Days passed as ships were prepared, holds filled with grain, yet whispers in the court sowed doubt in the king's heart. "Why give so much to strangers? Keep the grain, grow richer, no one will dare challenge you," his advisors urged. Pride sharpened in Acastus, tempting him to keep the grain, dismissing gratitude as weak and gold as meager. The night before departure, a sudden storm tore the harbor, tossing ships like toys upon the raging waves. From the tempest a voice thundered, "Acastus, a king's word binds more than a man. Will you honor your oath?" Kneeling on the cliffs, rain drenching his robes, the king felt the crushing weight of his promise and his pride. He saw in his mind the starving children, the desperate faces of distant mothers, lives tethered to his choice. At dawn, before his court, his voice steady though his heart trembled, he declared, "The ships will sail." The harbor cleared, skies softened, and the vessels departed, laden with grain, carrying hope across the sea. The envoy wept in gratitude, pledging loyalty beyond gold, a bond that no crown could ever purchase. As the ships vanished, a breeze stirred warm and gentle, thunder rolling not in anger but in approval. Zeus had tested him, and though pride nearly consumed him, he chose honor, and honor became his legacy. For generations, bards sang of King Acastus, who kept his word, proving that a promise held is worth more than a crown. In the hills of Thessaly lived Damon, a humble shepherd, his life guided by the rhythm of nature, the flock, his family, his heart steady and full. He owned little, but he shared much, offering bread to strangers, tending his sheep with patience, and thanking the gods for every dawn that touched his land. Zeus, ever watchful, saw a question within him, not pride nor ambition, but faith that could only be tested when storms rose to shatter calm skies. One summer, clouds gathered heavy and black, winds restless, sheep uneasy, and whispers spread through the village of a storm unlike any other. Neighbors fled to shelter, but Damon stood by his flock, staff in hand, his duty unshaken. Though the air grew thick and the heavens threatened, the storm struck fierce and wild, rain pouring, thunder splitting the night, lightning tearing the earth, his flock scattering in fear and chaos. Through the storm appeared a traveler cloaked in shadow, his voice loud as thunder, urging Damon to abandon the flock and save himself. The shepherd's heart wavered, for the words pierced him, yet he could not forsake the sheep, for they were his charge, his bond, his life. "I cannot leave them," Damon cried, voice breaking through the wind. "My word is my bond. My duty is my soul. They are my family." The traveler's eyes flashed with stormlight, his form shimmering, and Damon knew this was Zeus, testing not his strength but his devotion. Lightning split the meadow, sheep scattering once more. Damon ran through the storm, calling each by name, refusing to abandon even one. Rain drenched his body, his strength waned, yet his resolve grew sharper, for every sheep he gathered bound him deeper to his vow. At last he guided them to a cave, safe from the storm, and collapsed at his mouth, whispering thanks for the strength to endure. When dawn broke, the storm cleared, the flock stood safe, and high above an eagle circled, its cry carrying the pride of Zeus. The villagers honored Damon with reverence, telling of the shepherd who kept faith in the storm, blessed by the hand of Zeus. Zeus's test had not been of wealth or power, but of loyalty, of keeping duty when all the world cried out to forsake it. Damon proved that even the humblest man, armed with love and faith, could shine brighter than kings, his story carried across the land. So when storms shook Thessaly's hills, people prayed, remembering Damon, believing thunder was not wrath, but a reminder of the strength of the soul. In Corinth lived Callias, a young poet whose gentle voice carried power, not through flattery of kings, but by singing truths that touched every heart. He wrote of love and loss, of hope and longing, honoring the humble farmer more than the general, praising compassion above fear or glory. The lords grew uneasy. Why sing of the common people? Why praise humility when fear rules better? But Callias refused to bow. One festival night he sang in the square. His verses spoke of justice, of lives overlooked, and the crowd listened as if hearing their own souls. From the crowd stepped a tall stranger, eyes glinting like stormlight. "Would you speak so boldly if it cost you everything?" he asked. Callias felt eternity in that gaze. This was Zeus in disguise, testing not his talent but the courage behind his words. At night doubts weighed heavy. Some urged silence for safety. Others begged him to continue, for he gave voice to those who had none. What is truth worth, he thought, if silence saves me but leaves the world in chains? The stars gave no answer, only watchful light. The Lord summoned him at dawn. In marble halls, they demanded he abandon his verses and sing only of their triumphs and victories. His heart raced. To obey was to betray himself. To resist was to risk ruin. He lifted his voice, soft at first, then unshaken. A poet does not serve crowns, he declared. A poet serves truth, for truth is the only song worthy of breath. The lords raged, but thunder rolled. The hall shook, torches flickered, and Zeus revealed himself, crowned in light, his voice rolling like a storm. You have chosen well, poet. Words can be chains or wings, and you have given wings to mortals. His presence silenced every proud lord. Callias bowed, trembling yet unbroken. Zeus gave no riches, only his protection, and the promise that truth would outlast power and stone. From then, Callias sang freely. His verses spread across Greece, carried by sailors and travelers, a flame of truth lighting countless hearts. Corinth remembered him not just as poet, but as a mortal, touched by Zeus, whose voice kept faith with the soul above fear. His songs endured long after rulers turned to dust. Through him, Zeus showed mortals that power fades, but truth shines brighter than any crown. The ninth chapter of this story carries us deeper into the unfolding drama, where mortal choices echo with the weight of divine judgment. The battlefield is quieter now, yet beneath the calm lies a tension sharp enough to cut stone, for everyone knows the storm has not passed. Survivors walk among ruins, their steps heavy with memory, eyes searching the horizon for meaning in the wreckage left behind. Some pray to the gods for mercy, while others curse them in anger, questioning why such suffering must serve as part of destiny. The temples, once glowing with incense and hymns, now stand half broken, their silence louder than the choirs that once filled them. A child picks up a shard of bronze from the dust, staring at it as though it might still carry the voice of the warrior who wielded it. The people whisper of omens, of shadows moving at dusk, of stars shifting strangely in the heavens, of dreams that feel more like prophecies. Among the leaders, doubt spreads like a quiet sickness, for though they claim victory, their hearts wonder if they have truly won. The gods themselves grow restless, their thrones heavy with silence, watching mortals with both pride and unease. Athena sees wisdom falter, while Ares hungers still for blood, each whispering different fates into the wind that circles the earth. Zeus, high upon Olympus, remained stern, his hand on the thunderbolt, but even he seems uncertain of the balance now unraveling. The war, it seems, has ended only on the ground. For in heaven, the conflict still burns, waiting to spill once more into mortal lives. In the quiet villages, farmers return to broken fields, finding plows rusted, soil scorched, yet still hoping for new harvests. Mothers tell children tales of heroes, softening the cruelty of truth with stories of courage, so the young may dream instead of fear. But scars run deep, etched not just into stone walls, but into the spirit of a people who wonder what the gods demand next. The echoes of prophecy return, whispered by seers in half-light, reminding all that destiny does not end with bloodshed. Instead, it reshapes itself, carrying forward the weight of what has been lost into the uncertain dawn of what is to come. And so, Part 9 closes not with peace, but with questions unanswered, leaving both mortals and gods in uneasy silence. For the story is not yet done, and the path ahead lies hidden in the shadow of fate's unyielding hand.